Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Merlin, Season 5, Episode 6, A Lesson in Vengeance. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So, in this episode, it starts with Gwen and Arthur going on a picnic for their anniversary, which he makes a point to note he remembered, though she makes a note that she did remind him a little bit of ways beforehand so that he would remember. And as they're on their way, they do end up with the horses being startled, and Arthur ends up falling off, almost getting attacked, but he manages to kill his would-be assassins, and it is discovered that his saddle was tampered with. That is when the knights go to arrest his stable hand, named Tyr, who is completely unaware that anything had happened. However, when Merlin then goes and visits him in the cells after he is sentenced to death, we do find out that he did see someone tampering with the saddle, but his mother was threatened if he should tell, and he'd rather die than have his mother die, so he refuses to talk. Merlin informs Arthur of this. Gwen convinces him not to go and visit Tyr, and then Gwen goes to the cells and kills Tyr, revealing she was the one who had tampered with the saddle. We then see Morgana going to a dark magic shop and buying a set of poisons, one to put Arthur to sleep and one to cause a painful slow death. And she gives this to Gwen, who then poisons Arthur's meal with the one that sets him to sleep, before then poisoning him with the henbane, which causes him to have a slow, painful death. Gaius, of course, is called, realizes that the poisons are deadly, and he doesn't have a way to cure Arthur outside of magic. Gwen then frames Merlin for this, because who else would have access to Arthur's food? And so Merlin ends up in the cells, but Gaius gives him his aging potion, which allows Merlin to then turn into Dragoon the Great, and he then leaves the cell, re-enters the castle, climbing in through Arthur's window. Once he escapes, the warning bells go off. Gwen is then encouraged to leave the room. This leaves it open for Merlin to cast a spell to save Arthur, which works. Merlin then returns to the cell. Arthur wakes up the next day and frees Merlin because he knows beyond any doubt Merlin would not be the one to poison him, obviously. And so then Merlin comes to him and is like, I need to tell you something, because he's the only one who knows it's Gwen right now, because she ended up ripping one of her dresses and he was able to match the shred of fabric to one of her damaged dresses when he was doing the laundry, and has also noticed that she's been behaving oddly, sneaking out, etc. However, before he can do so, Arthur calls the court together and reveals that Gwen managed to find the bottles of poison, and they were traced back to the supplier, and the supplier admits that he sold them to Morgana, which means Merlin, of course, is not being suspected, but neither is the true culprit, Gwen. And that is where this episode ends. So now that we've been reminded about what happened, we'll now rank the episode. As always, we'll rank first on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So our mostly objective rank values, we have the single episode supporting character introductions, and we have +1 point for Tyr Seward, who was the regrettable collateral damage to Gwen's first assassination attempt, and then Sindri, who is the shop owner and the third person that she framed to get away with it by selling him out. Then we have +4 points for the multi-season main character developments, and that's Merlin being imprisoned and Arthur being poisoned. And that brings us to 10 points. However, this episode did have a few negatives. First, of course, is negative messaging or behavior, where we have the framing of Tyr and Merlin. And Sindri wasn't necessarily framed. He did sell Morgana the poisons, but it was Gwen who basically threw him under the bus. So he could also be counted in that, but that is -2 points. We have another -2 points for the fact that Gwen did go to the sell and murder tier with a dagger herself, not trusting him not to talk to Arthur. And then I also took -3 points for the main relationship regression or breakup because Gwen actually poisons Arthur, which I think is a bad sign for their marriage at the current point in time. So -3 points seemed fair. But that leaves us with a 3 out of 10 for this episode. And that brings the mostly objective ranking to in first, Arthur's Bane, The Death Song of Uther Pendragon, The Desir, Another's Sorrow, The Dark Tower, and then this episode, A Lesson in Vengeance, is in 6th place. On the personal side of things, as we all know, I'm not a huge fan of Gwen as the character, as the queen, as the Guinevere of Legends, you know. Like I said, if she was a maid named Gwen and just a side background character, probably would like her, but as the Guinevere of Legends, I just really hate what the show did to the character, and therefore I can never really get behind her, unfortunately. So the fact that it was very Gwen heavy, not a huge fan of. It also felt very repetitive. We already had an episode where somebody close to Arthur, that would be Merlin, under the influence of Morgana, tried to kill Arthur. However, when Merlin did it, it was hilarious. When Gwen did it, not so much. It was more serious. She almost succeeded before failing and doesn't have the excuse of having a literal worm in her neck taking over. And then it also felt repetitive because we also had Morgana back in the day when she was in the castle trying to kill Uther and being completely unsuspectable because she was so close to the king, and now they're repeating the same plot points with Gwen, who's close to the king, not being able to be suspected because of her closeness. The only difference is instead of a daughter, it's a wife, but still, the point is it felt very repetitive, so not necessarily the greatest. However, I did find that it was, as far as entertainment value, it was engaging and entertaining to watch the episode. I did like the bit with Dragoon the Great because I do like when Merlin gets to kind of go off. He even gets to tell off the cook who's always, you know, swatting at him. So that was fun. But I think that it was unfortunate that Tyr had to die because he was completely innocent of the crime he was being going to be executed for, and then he ends up assassinated, so that sucks for him. And it is noted in the series that he was loyal to Arthur and had been serving him as his stable hand for since he was a child, and so that's even more pitiable too. And it's like, of all the people, why did Gwen pick like an innocent, like common person? She could have framed maybe somebody who deserved it. Because, you know, like, even though she's brainwashed and now hates Arthur, I don't know that she necessarily hates Camelot or its people. Like, I don't know that she was brainwashed to that extent. So why are you framing, like, innocent, common people instead of maybe somebody who deserved it? It's just unfortunate. But, again, it did build tension really well. It did have a close call with Arthur, and of course, because we're mid-season, we know he was going to survive, but it still did build that tension really well. It was like a near miss. It is letting the audience in on Gwen's evilness and Merlin figuring out her evilness, but we haven't had anybody else brought in on that yet, so it adds some curiosity for the future. Ultimately, I felt that there was enough positives in the way the episode was put together to give it a 7 out of 10, but also like a lot of negatives, which is why it's only a 7. And that brings us to in first, Arthur's Bane, Another's Sorrow, The Death Song of Uther Pendragon, A Lesson in Vengeance is in 4th place, followed by The Dark Tower, and then The Desir is in 6th. Bringing us now to our series ranking so far, and on the mostly objective ranking, we have Season 4 in first, followed by Season 2, Season 3, and then Season 1 in 4th place. Season 5 has a score of 45 out of 110 so far. On our personal ranking side, we have Season 4, followed by Season 3, Season 2, and Season 1 in last place. But Season 5 so far has a score of 43 out of 110. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Merlin Season 5, Episode 6, A Lesson in Vengeance. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.